welcome back to Voice Talks. I'm 𝗪𝗲𝗄𝗧 and your host for this monthly series. Today we're discussing best practices for designing, building, and marketing voice experiences. What's most exciting to me about this topic is that voice is starting to be adopted more widely, and thus giving us very concrete learnings. These learnings, along with the growing commitment to voice technology throughout the tech industry, are giving reasons for many brands to begin integrating voice into their applications. Every day, there is so much happening in this industry, whether it's virtual assistants launching new experiences across surfaces like TVs, auto, mobile, speakers, wearables, etc., or a new company in this space raising millions of dollars like Clubhouse, or even a new acquisition like Microsoft's recent $16 billion purchase of Nuance Communications, which, by the way, is their second largest acquisition since LinkedIn. Nuance, for those of you to know, it's a pioneer in voice recognition that once used to power Siri's backend. All of this suggests that there is extensive opportunity in this space. And that's why we're excited to share best practices throughout today's show to ensure that anyone who is or wants to build for voice has the best information to succeed. All of this excitement in this space is also what inspired Voice Talks to be a home for this budding community of voice enthusiasts. And can you believe that Voice Talks has already been around for an entire year? Just last April, we were kicking off from this same spot. And I hope that you've all been enjoying as much as I have our celebrations on social media. Last week was also a very special week because we found out that Voice Talks was nominated for a 𝗪𝗡𝗡 award. It's the best gift and just most wonderful recognition for our community. And I hope that you all feel so proud of it because Voice Talks truly wouldn't be what it is today without all of your feedback, your ideas, and just all of your constant support. So this nomination is really for all of us. And thank you so much for everyone who's voted so far. And for those of you who haven't, please go cast your vote right now at the link that we're going to be sharing. You can click on it and literally go vote. It takes no time, basically. And you can also find this link on our YouTube description. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well if you haven't already. Now, I'm excited to introduce the wonderful speakers on today's show who will share what they've learned building for voice. We will start with a keynote conversation where 𝗪𝗡𝗪 will share why she's focused her career around AI and voice. Then, in our partner spotlight, Sarah Nelson, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Samsung, will discuss the strategy and learnings from partnering with Google Assistant. The ecosystem update will feature Brandon Kaplan and Heather Peterson from Skill Creative, discussing their learnings building voice experiences for HBO Max and Meredith Corporation, among many others. Then we're going to welcome back 𝗪𝗡𝗪𝗀 for the product deep dive, who will share best practices for conversational design. And to close off the show, we'll have our Ask the Expert segment with Jessica Dene 𝗪𝗓 in a discussion with Google developer experts Alan Furstenberg and Dennis Balasek, breaking down how to execute 𝗪𝗓𝗪's best practices. And on the topic of best practices, this month we partner with the Voice Den and Voice Launch for a device giveaway. We'll be sharing our favorite best practices from social media throughout the show. But before we do that, we also wanted to give our live audience a chance to participate. So please tell us your best practices when building for voice or integrating voice in your brand. Remember to leave your answer in the chat or in social media using #VoiceTalks. It is quite a show today, so let's welcome our first guest, 𝗪𝗡𝗪𝗀.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is 𝗪𝗡𝗪𝗀, and I am super excited to be here and very grateful to have the opportunity to share my journey in voice technology with you. It has been an incredible ride, and it all really started actually quite a long time ago. My son, as you can see here, my son Max, on the screen holding the heart. He was born with Down syndrome, and it really, as a technologist, I instantly started looking for ways for me to help make the world more accessible to him. But interestingly enough, in 2014, my dad was actually in a horrible car accident, got a traumatic brain injury, and he too started really needing the world to evolve a bit to make it easier for him, because he was no longer in a space where he could use a smartphone or a keyboard or a mouse in the traditional sense. And it just so happened that I had just joined the Alexa team at that time. And it was an incredible time because I didn't know really much about how to use voice, as maybe some of you, right? Just getting into voice for the first time back then. And I wanted to figure out, how could I use this to help the people that I cared about, and maybe to help my customers or, the organizations that I was working for. And so one of the things that, of course, I started to do was just be very vocal about my journey. But before I do, I always like to mention how important it is to really understand what we have at our fingertips, right? My dad was nice enough to raise me on the golden age of science fiction. And so I learned at a very young age what it meant to talk to a computer, right? I saw it happening on the screen and read it happening in books. And then now I have the opportunity to actually make that a reality. But as these capabilities become more available to us, we really have to think about, right, what we're going to do with this. I always think about that quote, with great power comes great, you might know this one, responsibility, right? It's such an incredible time for us to have all of these tools and technologies available to us, whether we're deep in the technology or whether we're just getting started. And it's really important for us to think, how are we going to use these powers that we've now acquired? How are we going to use these tools? So I always like us to set an intention for how we're going to use it. Let's think, ethically and responsibly about how this technology can serve as many people as possible. So once I do that and I kind of set my intention about, all right, how can I help the world? And in my case, right, my dad and my son really drove my interest in this space. But then, I'm a technologist. I work for companies. So I started thinking about, how do brands do this? And one of the things I'll tell you, a very quick anecdote about how I got started, my very first skill. And actually it was the first 5 skills because, I just kept building and building until one took. And part of that building process really included me figuring out what I wanted to give the world, right? What do I as a technologist want to build? And many of us technologists do this, right? We think, what can I do to change the world with artificial intelligence, or change the world with voice technology and a voice user interface? But then the very next thing I wanted to do was then see if the world actually was looking for what I wanted to build. And so I went onto Google and actually literally went and did a trend analysis, right? I looked at Google and said, all right, Google, who's looking for what? And it just so happened that what I was passionate and continue to be passionate about at the time was mindfulness, kindness, leadership, random acts of kindness. And I went to Google, I searched trends. They were all trending. I believe they are continuing to trend to this day. Thank goodness. And I built my voice applications directly to what my end users were asking for. And I felt that was like, I wasn't intentional. I didn't say, oh, let me go research I'm a technologist. I just wanted to build. But that small step I took to understanding more about my users ended up really catapulting my skills. I ended up, in that first year, I built over 100 skills and gained over 1 million unique users of those applications. So, and I think much of that was because I started looking to solve problems they had with passion that aligned to the passions that I had as a technologist. Now, fast forward into some of my more advanced skills. As I started building more advanced multimodal capabilities, I started working with a lot more brands. And in those brand conversations, I realized that there was something that it was kind of like gold waiting to be used to build a multimodal or voice experience. And that is really in, let's say you're a business and you have a website or you have a mobile app. You can actually go in, and granted, I'm a technologist, so I look for data-driven approaches to things. That's why I went to Trends to look it up. But I went and I want my, if I have a website or I have a mobile app, I go and look at the data that's in those two places. And I find out, what are my people looking at? What are my customers looking for? What are they trying to do? I call it click trails, right? I'm looking for what are the activities they do most often. Then I cross-reference the most common things they're trying to do with the things that are the hardest to do, right? How many clicks does it take for them to get there? And oftentimes I say, if it takes more than 5 clicks, that's too long, especially if they try to do it every day. I can make that a voice application. I can bubble that up to a top level intent and they could just ask for it. And it's not like I didn't build anything brand new. I didn't create anything from scratch. I took something they were already asking for and made it accessible to them with their voice. And honestly, I've had people say, oh my gosh, it's like magic. And that's how I know I'm successful, is when what I build in these voice applications seems like magic to the users that end up using them. And so after that, I got very excited about how do I build more of these skills that align with what companies want to give to the world and users really need. But many of us, of course, may just want to find out how to get started, right? How to actually use these tools to start building. And what I ended up doing, again, in my attempt to acquire as much knowledge as possible, is I ended up learning by doing. I actually acquired this way of learning by looking at other types of learners, right? So I started researching artists, and they ended up learning how to do pretty complex things by tracing it. I don't know if you're familiar with tracing paper, they'd trace it. And so that's what I did. I ended up going to where we trace good stuff. I went to GitHub, I went to Google and Amazon and Microsoft. They all had repositories full of complex experiences that I wanted to model. So I ended up just building off of those projects. And I built so many of those projects, developed the muscle memory to actually build the technical assets that I could then start to craft my own. And some of my best skills were really a collection of what I learned from all of those people. I always say I built on the shoulders of these giants that were nice enough to open source their content so I could learn. And now I teach lots of people to do it the same way. I think it's a critical part of the path, is that even if you're not a technologist, even if you're, let's say you're in product or user experience, there's a way for you to get involved in voice technology and start actually doing something with this technology long before you're pushing something into production or developing it for a client, right? You can learn and acquire this knowledge by actually getting your fingers on a keyboard or having a conversation with your customers and talk about what voice might mean to them. And I've found a lot of really rewarding experiences come from that. There are so many great speakers today. I'm really excited. I'm friends with many of them. And I am excited about what they'll talk to you about, because it gives us a chance to think all about the holistic view of voice tech, who it can serve, how many people it could serve, but also how do we just reduce friction for those? I tend to, because I have people in my very intimate life that need technology to work in this world. However, there's lots of people who would just like to be less frustrated with their technology, and voice tech can be a huge catalyst for that as well. So have a great time today. It was my pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to connecting with you another time.
Noelle, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's really inspirational to learn why you're so passionate about the voice space and how you're driven to make technology more accessible for your son and father. The approach that you shared is also one that we do very often. As you said, we also map out customer journeys by frequency, meaning how often a user is doing that action. And then we overlay that with how long does it take to do that journey. Does it take 2, 3, 5 steps or even more? Or does it take a long time to type out? And then we assign a value to that. And normally, high-frequency actions that take many steps are a really great place to start because, as you know, adding voice to it can often help make the task more efficient and just more enjoyable as well. A friend on social media, 𝗪𝗍𝗂, shared a similar best practice. She said, do your research, be it primary or secondary research. Do at least some into what users are expecting and what tone of voice they're comfortable with. That is so true. Knowing your users and how they respond is so important, and then being able to back your approach with this data is key. Thank you so much, Mikey, for participating on social media. We're very excited to be sending you a device, so keep your eyes out for it. And next, we're going to hear from Sarah Nelson, who will discuss the Google Assistant integration with Samsung Smart TVs. Take it away, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Nelson, and I lead strategic partnerships for Samsung. I'm responsible for the Google Assistant partnership and integration into our Smart TV platform. Very excited to be here today. At Samsung, we're continually looking to redefine the TV experience and to bring more capabilities to the TV that offer more value to our customers. Since launching the Smart TV platform over a decade ago, our vision has really been that the TV is much more than a TV in the traditional sense. That it's truly a hub in the home, a center where users can go to access all of their entertainment needs. And that could be accessing their favorite video and music services, but more and more it means to do a lot more than that. It means to display their favorite artworks through the frame, or access their fitness stats and workout videos through Samsung Health, or leverage the TV as a tool in the work from home workplace by accessing remote PC. And what we've seen is that our aspiration for the TV to be so much more than a TV and to do so much more than offer video content has really started to align with consumer expectations. Users today are doing so much more from home, and they're looking to bring all the activities they're doing from home, whether that's shopping, working out, learning, working, to really bring that to the best screen, the best display in the home, the TV. And so through voice and our partnership with Google Assistant, we really are able to realize that vision and meet that consumer need. The Assistant allows us to bring so much new functionality to the TV, whether that's learning about the world through the Assistant or controlling their smart home. And what we see is that as the Assistant continues to evolve and new capabilities are brought into that ecosystem, we're continuing to offer our customers a better and better experience through our TVs. We see that customers are looking for really three things out of their TV experience. First, they're looking to get so much more functionality and capability out of their TVs. They're looking to do more with their TVs than they ever have before. Second, they want those experiences to be really simple, easy to use. They want interfaces that allow them to quickly access their favorite content, the information they're looking for, with very little friction. And lastly, I think really related to that, they're looking for, highly personalized experiences that learn from their behavior over time, learn from their preferences, and evolve to better meet their needs. And I think our partnership with the Assistant helps us really address all of those consumer needs. First, the Assistant allows us to greatly extend the functionality available on our TV through the features and capabilities that the Assistant makes available through its own service and then through its ecosystem of partnerships. And two, I think voice is really the original interface. It is the most natural, most intuitive way for customers to interact with their device. And so by adding voice, not only are they unlocking new capabilities, but it's allowing them to more efficiently and easily interact with their product. And lastly, I think the thing that's really powerful about the Assistant is that it is intelligent. It continues to learn and evolve with the customer. And like a true assistant, it learns the user's needs and better reacts to that. And we have seen that the Google capabilities continue to grow, the ecosystem continues to grow. So it's really an ever-evolving, ever-improving user experience for customers. Our philosophy as a platform is to be open and to provide customers with as much choice as possible and ensure that they're really able to customize their TV experience to their preferences. We want to make sure that all of the top technology and services are available on our platform and that customers are able to really choose which service it is that they like to use best. And when we look at Google Assistant, it is one of the most popular and most widely adopted voice agents around the world. So it's really important for our customers who are Google users to be able to access the Assistant and extend the functionality that they may already be using within their home to their most used and most central device in the home, the TV. And I think what we've seen overall is across voice and across the platform is that as we offer more services and more capabilities to customers, we see increased engagement with those services and with the platform. So it's really an expanding pie. So I think it was important for us to supplement our overall service offering with the assistant. Users have been really delighted with the Google Assistant experience in our TVs, and I think we have been really pleasantly surprised just by the experience and how engaged customers have been with voice on our TVs. And I think we're really excited to see where this heads. We think that as more customers adopt voice as their primary way to interface with our products, we're just going to continue to see growth in this category. And I think today we've been very focused on the core assistant experience and making sure that we're bringing new capability to the TV, that we're improving what the TV has been able to do in the past. But I think as we look forward, we are going to think through ways that voice can really be, modified and take advantage of the really unique form factor of the TV. As a large screen device connected to the internet, centrally located in a customer's home, we think there are so many unique things that we can be doing with the assistant and are really looking forward to evolving the product and developing new experiences with Google. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion today. Thank you for having me.
Sarah, thank you for joining us today and sharing how your customers are using voice integration in Samsung TVs. I personally really enjoy seeing how the TV market has evolved so much. I believe that smart TVs now account for like 50% of TVs overall. And as you said, they're truly becoming a great hub for the home, providing customers with a lot of options of what they can do with their TVs. I also loved your point about voice tech being an ever-improving user experience. Customers expect this. They expect the technology to improve with time. So don't worry if it's not perfect on day one. Just continue listening to your users and improving your experiences. As with any product, really the best ones will always be the ones that continue to evolve. Now, our next guests, Brandon Kaplan and Heather Peterson from Skill Creative, have been building voice successfully for a while and are going to share their philosophies from approach to execution. It's all yours, Brendan.
Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it. We're going to chat with you all a little bit about, as an agency working with different brands, how do we build successful voice programs? So first, introductions. I'm Brandon Kaplan. I'm the CEO of Skill Creative. We're a voice agency based out of New York.
I'm Heather Peterson. I'm an account manager and creative strategist.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, for us, one of the biggest adages that we have in our company is we look at voice as a program, not a project. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about what are the 4 key pillars of building a successful program versus just looking at voice as a project that you might execute. And Heather can get us started today by talking about the most key point of that, which is precisely looking at voice as a program and not a project.
Yeah, this is something that we repeat to each other so often that it's kind of like in our blood at this point at Skilled. And what it means for us is making sure that any voice build is situated within an ecosystem so that it's not just this isolated experience that we kind of set and forget. It's something that's working in an omni-channel approach. So thinking about how users are coming in, how users are coming back, where they're going next. It takes a multimodal approach, meaning, thinking about how are users going to encounter this on what devices and how can we optimize for all those different experiences. Mm-hmm. It's definitely about a really comprehensive go-to-market strategy. So ahead of launch, planning to, bring it to market the best way that you can to set yourself up for success. And then also sustaining that past launch so that it's not just about the go-to-market strategy, it's about a sustained marketing strategy over time that, takes into account key intervals in the life of the project.
Yeah, and As a case study, Meredith Corporation, which is a client of ours, is a perfect example of this. We've worked with Meredith for a number of years now, and since the beginning of when we started working with them, they've always looked at voice as a program and not a project. And that's because they're a media company. So they've always kind of pushed us and said, how is this going to integrate into our emails, into our social, into our print, into our digital? How is this going to come across from a visual and an audio perspective? So every time that we're launching something with them, we're thinking about all these other elements, and we're not just launching a voice experience that's going to go out and try and be successful on its own. We're wrapping it in this complete program. So I think that's why Meredith has been really successful, and we really push our other partners to think in that same way of how do we deploy a program and think about it from that aspect all the way in the beginning through development and launch. Another really key thing about building a successful program is just making sure that it's backed by research and consumer insights. So we always tell our partners that knowledge is power. And if you have a really good educational base, then you actually have the ability to be more creative. So if you have good consumer insights, it's kind of like digging for gold. You're looking for these little nuggets of information that are going to allow you to come up with better use cases and better creative ideas and better solutions that make that voice experience better. And oftentimes you'll find that the concept you went into planning with is maybe just a couple degrees off from something that could be really great if you backed it up with research and insights. And then what that also does is it allows you to go to stakeholders and say, hey, here's why this experience that we're going to build with you is going to be successful. And if you bring those stakeholders through the research and insight process, they're really bought in. And it also allows those stakeholders to go to other partners within the organization and say, hey, we have this really great idea for a voice experience and a program. Here's why we know it's going to be successful. Here's the creative execution. And then everybody's kind of holding hands going through the process. Heather, why don't you tell us how we've done that with HBO Max recently?
Yeah, as Brandon knows, I'm really into getting user quotes, consumer quotes, pulling those into any kind of creative strategy decks or presentations that I can. And that definitely happened with HBO Max. We have a really great voice experience launching in a little over a month with them. And in that process, we started with the client's kind of concept for it, what they thought we might want to do. And then we sort of chugged along, and then we kind of pressed pause, and we were like, you know what, we really need to take a step back, take a broader and deeper look at exactly what it is that users need, and how can we leverage what's like unique and fun and interesting about voice in specific to create the best user experience possible, while also keeping in mind what the client's goals are, what they want for users. So what we did was we looked at social media, we looked at Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. What were people saying? What were they, wanting? And then we did some broader consumer surveys and got some insights that way. And then we set up these one-on-one user interviews where we kind of played out different scenarios for different iterations of the concept and figured out what would users expect to get from this, what would they want to hear next, and what would sort of their end goals be. And then the whole time we had HBO Max there kind of listening in, looking on, so that they were learning alongside us, and so that they could remind us, okay, yes, like this is what we want this is what users say that they want, but also this is what we want for users, so that we could kind of keep both of those things in mind as we developed the best version of the concept we could. Iterating for success, this is another point where we want to make sure that we're really looking at the user experience from all different angles. And what this means is that you can launch a product and then you can continue to iterate on it. You can make creative updates. You can have a phased approach where you continue to improve and meet benchmarks. And one of the key aspects of doing this is planning really intentionally for your analytics. What data are you going to be collecting, and what can it tell you about the experience? And then making sure you do deep dives into those analytics. So, you're looking at the data every week, you're seeing what's going on with the experience that way, but then you're taking the time to look much deeper and really think about, people might be dropping off here. What of our end goals for the user for this? Are we reaching those? So that you can continue towards gaining maybe even more success past launch and just continue improving the experience.
Yeah, this is something that we always do with our partners, and we always say that we have the ability to find more success through those iterations after launch than we find on our initial launch. So we're always kind of unpacking those analytics, the 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks after we launch. And Pottermore is a really good example. We just launched this experience. It's actually a partnership between Pottermore Publishing and Google. It's this really cool Canvas experience called Quidditch Through the Ages. Check it out if you haven't. But we launched it. It's this incredible production, audio, visual, and we launched it. A lot of work went into it, and now we're looking at the analytics, and we're isolating these small areas where we're saying, oh, if we tweak that, if we shorten that, if we move that around, if we change that turn of conversation, we know that we can increase conversion and completion rates and really kind of maximize those KPIs. So we always bake in time and room for an iterative process after something launches. The last piece of the puzzle for us that's kind of another key pillar is just making sure that the project is resourced correctly. So we think about it in the aspect of human resources. Do you have the right people, not just on your team, but within the organization that you're working with or the team that you're working in, to have the right people to get this program off the ground? Do you have the right capital resources? So do you have what's needed to do the right technical development, production, marketing plan, go to market, all of those things? Do you have the right stakeholder resources in terms of who is around this program that can be a champion of the program and constantly be there to make sure it gets off the ground correctly? And then do you have production resources in knowing that you've kind of mapped out your production and you're not going to have bottlenecks or barriers and you'll have a smooth ride? It's never completely smooth, but if you're really scaling and planning for that production, then you have a much better path. So we always want to think about resourcing for an experience before we even go into development, and that results in a more successful program. And I think Google's a good example. Heather, maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, I think as you kind of go from planning through kickoff all the way past launch of a voice experience, it's almost like you're starting with, like a little baby that you have to make sure you have the support and resources to keep alive, and then you want to keep it growing and developing, and then you want to kind of send it out into the world and make sure that it's prepared to keep living a life, beyond you. And I would say that I've learned the most about doing that working with partners like Google, because, Google is not only a client in that case, but that's also the platform that you're launching on. And you can learn so much about how to resource so that you're, planning and staffing the right way so that you have all of the interested stakeholders involved, and so that even through production and after launch, you can be successful.
We're really excited about voice, and we love working with partners like Google, and we love kind of putting these programs in place, which allows us to be as creative as possible and build really good programs. So thanks for taking the time to listen to us today. And if you want to reach out and chat about voice or voice strategy or voice creativity, feel free to. You can find us on social channels @SkilledCreative, or feel free to email us hi@SkilledCreative, and we're happy to chat anytime. But thanks again for having us, and back to you, Sophia.
Thank you.
There's so much in this segment. I really like how voice isn't a project, but a program. Something that you can continue to iterate and grow, starting simple and then gradually getting more complex. Thank you so much for sharing so many gems on how you brought your experience to market and how you continue to improve them over time by looking real deep into the analytics frequently. Kane Sims on social media shared a similar thought. Let's take a look. Make sure you test your creation with real users early and often. Flying blind can have you create something that either doesn't really add value or doesn't work as well as it could. And without testing, you might never know or find out too late. Kane, that is exactly right. I can't emphasize enough the importance of testing. Test, 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 test. That's why it's also great sometimes to do a soft launch where you launch your experience to a small percentage of users and you don't promote it right away. This allows you to test your experience with real users, learn from their behavior, and improve it before actually rolling it out to 100% of customers and marketing it. So thank you so much, Kane, again, for participating on social media, and we're excited to send you a Google device. Now, you might be wondering where to start with conversation design. And that's why we brought out our fantastic guest, the one and only 𝗪𝗓𝗂𝗧, who's an expert in this field. I highly suggest that you take out your notepads for this segment.
Hi, I'm 𝗪𝗓𝗂𝗧 from the Conversation Design team at Google. For quite a while now, Minju Kim, Kate Berman, and I have been helping developers create great storytelling and gaming experiences for Google Assistant on smart displays. Along the way, we've learned a lot about what does and doesn't work. So here are some things to keep in mind when you're designing and developing interactive games and stories. Number one, set expectations in the introduction. To make it easy for the user to engage with your experience, your introduction should provide instructions for the interaction and set clear expectations. For games, use the opening as a kind of tutorial to explain the object of the game and how it's played. But remember, the goal of the user is to get started playing quickly, so keep that introduction short, ideally less than a minute or so. In the case of interactive stories, tell the user how long the experience is likely to be. This approach might be as simple as a labeled description in the GUI. Also, be sure to let them know what to expect when they're asked for responses during the narrative. A natural language interface opens lots of creative avenues for design, but it also means there's a greater initial responsibility to articulate the goals of the interaction right from the beginning. Number two, find the balance between touch and voice interactions. Now, smart displays are designed to be used hands-free, and in the majority of cases, we assume that voice is the primary mode of interaction. In general, anything that a user can accomplish through touch should be able to be done through voice as well. Consider a kid asking for a bedtime story from their bed, or somebody playing a game while cooking with messy hands. Leveraging voice as an interface provides real value to our users. But users also appreciate fast interactions. Reading and tapping can sometimes be faster than listening and speaking, and for some games, touch may be the primary interaction modality. If gameplay would be much easier for the user with tapping, hey, guide them to use touch. Wherever possible, though, make sure the interactions are available through voice as well. Number three, keep the TTS, or text-to-speech, brief. Text-to-speech, or computer-generated voices, have improved exponentially in the last few years, but they aren't perfect. Through user testing, we've learned that users, especially kids, don't like listening to long TTS messages. Of course, some content, like interactive stories, shouldn't be reduced. But for games, try to keep your script simple. Wherever possible, leverage the power of the visual medium and show, don't tell. Or consider providing a skip button on the screen so that users can read and move forward without waiting until the TTS is finished. In many cases, the TTS and text on a screen won't always need to mirror each other. For example, the TTS may say,
"Great job. Let's move to the next question. What's the name of the big red dog?"
And the text on the screen might simply say, "What is the name of the big red dog?" Number four, consider first-time and returning users. Frequent users don't need to hear the same TTS instructions repeatedly. Optimize the experience for returning users. If it's a user's first time, try to explain the full context. If they revisit your action, acknowledge their return with a welcome back message, and try to shorten or taper the TTS. If you notice that the users return more than 3 or 4 times, try to get to the point as quickly as possible. Now here's an example of tapering the instructions for different users for a word game. Instructions for the first-time user.
Just say words you can make from the letters provided. Are you ready to begin?
For a returning user.
Make up words from the jumbled letters. Ready?
And for a frequent user.
Are you ready to play?
Number 5, open the mic properly. The microphone needs to open after every direct question because by asking a question, you're explicitly inviting the user to respond. Needing to say a wake word to open the mic is not intuitive to users in the middle of gameplay and could leave them confused, resulting in missed or repeated utterances and errors. Allow the user to respond as quickly as possible after a question has been asked by opening the mic immediately. Any language which cues the user to respond should be at the end of the prompt, just before the mic opens. This approach prevents the user from attempting to respond while the mic is closed, which causes frustration and creates errors. For example,
I have red, green, or blue. Which would you like?
As opposed to,
which color would you like? I have red, green, or blue.
Number 6, emphasize questions. One main difference between written and spoken language is that written language is persistent. It remains on the page where it can easily be reread if missed. Because conversation is linear and ephemeral, it's easy to miss when a question is being asked. Make the question clear so that users can understand and respond. Now, there are a few different ways to do this. There could be a change in background music or mood on the screen. Or you could add a short sound or ear con before the question's asked. If you're putting the questions on screen, they should be visible while the TTS is playing. Sometimes the player may want to skip ahead by reading the question and using touch to move forward. Number 7, prepare for no-match errors and edge cases. We recommend escalating error handling and context-specific prompting to give users multiple opportunities to re-engage when there's a choice to be made or a question answered. At each choice point of your experience, determine if a user response is required or if you can elegantly move users forward without hearing their choice. In an escalating error strategy, say the initial question is,
you can have red, green, or blue. Which color would you like?
If there's a no match where the user's response isn't understood, standard practice would be a rapid reprompt, like,
which color was that?
If there's another no match, the next response would give a little more context.
Would you like red, green, or blue?
If they still don't respond with something the system can recognize, you might just move them forward to keep them in the game or story.
Let's go with red this time.
You could also direct them to use buttons on the screen to make their choice. For situations where the user doesn't respond to a question, the mic will close after a predetermined number of seconds, requiring the user to use touch input. Number 8, support strongly recommended intents. There are some commonly used intents which enhance the user experience. If your action doesn't support them, users might get frustrated. Here's a list. Exit or quit closes the action. Repeat or say that again repeats the immediately preceding content. This should be available everywhere. Play again allows the user to start over. This intent gives users an opportunity to re-engage with their favorite experiences. Help provides more detailed instructions to users who may be lost. Depending on the type of action, this may need to be context-specific. Remember to return users to where they left off in gameplay after a help message plays. Pause or resume allows the user to stop and continue the experience. Provide a visual indication that the game has been paused and provide both visual and voice options to resume. Skip moves to the next decision point. Home or menu moves to the home or main menu of an action. Now, having a visual affordance for this is a great idea. Without visual cues, it's hard for users to know that they can navigate through voice even when it's supported. Go back moves to the previous page in an interactive story. Number 9, ensure legibility and readability. The smart display is a stationary device and it can be used from a distance in many cases. We recommend using bigger fonts to ensure legibility, at minimum 32 point for primary text and 24 point for secondary text. Also, using negative space properly may reduce visual clutter. If there's not enough space between the elements, they become hard to read and demand additional effort. Put some breathing room around the object. We recommend putting a 40-pixel margin at the edge of the screen. Number 10, provide visual feedback. When it takes a lot of time to execute a user's request, provide them with proper visual feedback. Instead of using a simple spinner, try to be transparent about what's happening. How much time remains to complete the task? How much of the content has been loaded? What's happening in the system? Also, be sure to give immediate touch feedback to users when they press buttons. It can easily prevent errors caused by double tapping. And finally, number 11, reduce cognitive load. Your screen can help reduce the cognitive load by showing compact information in an organized way. Keep the content on the screen clear, concise, and scannable, with the most important information first. Display prompts may need to be a condensed version of the spoken prompts and placed in the top or middle of the screen. Show any responses in suggestion chips at the bottom. And if you decide to use an icon button instead of a text button, the icon should be extra clear so that users can execute the button via voice without hesitation. So, there you have it. Our top suggestions for making your interactive games and stories amazing experiences that people will want to use over and over again. We can't wait to see what you'll create next. Thanks for watching.
Wally, thank you. As always, you truly explained conversational design so well, and those examples were fantastic. I thought it was exceptionally interesting to design with returning users in mind and not needing to repeat information. Skill Creative did a great job in this in building Quidditch through the ages, so I wanted to do a quick demo. Hey Google, talk to Quidditch.
Sorry, I don't know how to help with that. Here are other things you can try.
I'm gonna try again. Hey Google, talk to Quidditch story.
Okay, here's Quidditch through the ages. Highlights.
Welcome back, Knowledge Seeker. Still eager to learn more about Quidditch, I see.
Yes.
Well, there's always more to explore, so off we go.
Hey Google, stop. You can see how it's like so neat that at the beginning it like, bye. You can see that it welcomes me back. It acknowledges that I've been playing the game before. And I love that. It creates just a more like bonding and more personal experience with your assistant device. Now, our next segment features developer relations advocate Jessica 𝗩𝗂𝗓𝗏 in conversation with developer relations expert 𝗩𝗢𝗧𝗘 and Alex Richtenberg. They will break down Wally's advice and share best practices in building these concepts. Here's Jessica.
Thanks, Sophia. I'm excited to be back here at Voice Talks today. And for this segment, I'm going to be chatting with a couple of folks who are GDEs, which are Google Developer Experts for Google Assistant. And we'll be chatting about implementing a few design tips from conversational actions that Wally mentioned earlier in the show. But first, let's meet our GDEs that we have today. Alan, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey there. Thanks for having me. I'm Alan Furstenberg. I am a GDE for the Google Assistant and a number of other Google technologies. And I am an engineer at Objective Consulting.
Hello, everyone. My name is 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍. I'm co-founder at 𝗪𝗢𝗧𝗑, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. I just love the company name. It always makes me giggle whenever you mention it. So, what we're going to be doing today is I have 3 design topics that Wally mentioned earlier that I want us to talk about a little bit more, and also in the vein of how, as a developer, you would be implementing these conversation designs as well. So we're going to start off with the one that Wally mentioned about the TTS, or text-to-speech, not necessarily matching what is shown on the screen, specifically in the use case of using interactive canvas, where you have a screen, and so that text is different than what the actual action auditorially will tell you. The use case that he gave was when an action is asking for maybe several questions, that the audio would say something to the effect of like, great job, let's move on to the next question, and then say the question, versus the screen just showing the question. And so my question to both of you is, how would you implement this type of functionality? And let's start off with Dennis first.
Sure. So for every response, simple response, you can use the speech and text parameters, where you can specify text and speech separately. So for example, you can show some text and then you can play some speech to the user, customize with it SSML, and so on. You can specify this either in the actions in Google webhook or in your action builder project using YAML or JSON.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I love using SSML, especially when you're adding like fun little audio things as well. That's for me, it's like the very creative space of voice development.
One of the things that I like to think about when I'm designing the visuals to go along with the audio is that I can sometimes make use of lists. So there will be times when I may not want to read out a list of things, but I will want to show on the screen those kind of lists or options or buttons, depending on exactly what makes sense. So that's a really powerful tool, is to have something both said to you, but then have the display showing you those lists.
Oh my gosh, totally. I could even imagine, like, there's some use cases, at least for myself, where I have a hard time pronouncing certain words. I'm dyslexic. And so those type of options where you could just touch the screen and it's just like you said it is really helpful. But how does the Canvas app know that? Like, what is there a connecting kind of tool or feature with Interactive Canvas that can translate that touch into that?
Sure. One of the great things about the Interactive Canvas is that it's just HTML and JavaScript. So when the user touches the screen at a point, it's handled just like any other JavaScript touch event, which is really great. Then as part of your event handler, there are Interactive Canvas functions which let you send a text query back to the server, just as if the user had said exactly that word or some word that you set it for. So your button can trigger this call, and it looks to your webhook like the user said something.
Okay, so my next question that I have is, when building for an action, how do you handle different things like gradings or instructions on how to use your action when it comes to new visitors or new users versus your returning users? Because I know for me personally, when I'm first playing with an action, I want to have a better sense of what to do. But once I've played with it, it seems tedious. So how would you handle that? And let's start off with Alan first.
So one of the nice things is that the assistant will provide the last time that a user has visited your action. And it's part of the JSON that is sent to you, and you can read this in your library. If that field isn't there, well, this is their first time visiting you, so you know whether it's their first time or whether they're a repeating user. You can also tell from that how long it's been since they were last there. So, if it's been a while, that can be useful as well sometimes. Additionally, there are a number of libraries such as Jovo and Multivocal that store additional information. So not just when was the last time they were there, but how many times have they visited you? And this is just stored in the regular user storage object. So it's always available again. And this gives you the ability to say, okay, let me give a long message their first time and a slightly shorter messages or, welcome back summary messages for subsequent times. But when they're old pros, when they've been there 10, 20 times, then they just want to get right down to business. Let's just get into the game. Let's get going. And you can make a nice, short introduction for those folks.
Yeah, I love that because things, those libraries that support how frequent, like the frequency, is really important, because just because someone visited you yesterday doesn't mean that they're not new. So being able to have those two data points can really give a better experience for your users.
It's really a fantastic way to just feel more personalized to the user, that the user really believes that you're comfortable with them, and that helps make them more comfortable with you.
And other great customization points might be to inform them about their progress they perhaps set up the last time, or you can also learn how they go through your action and say, okay, do you want the same as the last time? Should I just repeat that? And customize their path through your action so it's even more seamless the next time they visit you.
Ooh, how do you do that? Like, how do you keep track of that?
So you can either store visited intents. This would be much more complex if done right, but just the simple version. You can store the necessary parameters either in the user storage, or you can use some external database like Firestore to store the user information and then deploy some custom logic based on that, so you know what's the optimal path for this specific user.
Yeah, it's almost like giving your action like memory, almost like to remember where your user has been, kind of figuring out those user journeys that they might be interested in. That sounds great. Okay, so I'm really excited for my last question because it's a little controversial in like the conversation design space. So for those who are not familiar of like the 3 strike rules when it comes to fallback intents, or no match intents, which means that an intent doesn't get matched. And so this is like the else statement of intents. And kind of what is practice is after the 3rd time a user experiences this consecutively, you want to end your conversation or your action gracefully. Acknowledge, oh, there's been an error, and close this out. But Wally was mentioning that potentially for games specifically, that you might not want to follow that. And instead of ending gracefully, you might want to choose a functionality or the option for the user for them. So my question is for you two is a lot of platforms, including Actions on Google, we have these kind of baked into the platform. So how do you handle this if you want to implement after the 3rd time a user has hit a no match intent to pivot them to another part of the conversation or to continue the interaction?
Sure. So in these decision-making points, it's crucial to know what are you making the decision about. If it's something simple, like going left or right, it's perfectly fine to just pick for the user either by some predefined state or just picking at random. But if it's something more personal, like a user's name, it would be kind of weird and disruptive for the whole experience to just pick something at random if the user didn't have anything to say about it. It's also nice to distinguish between if you didn't hear anything for the smart speakers or if you just didn't understood. So those are 2 separate intents, system level intents in actions on Google. It's the no match and no input. For each of them, in the console, you can set up the webhook and the actions that should be triggered from those webhooks. So you get the levels, if it's the 1st, 2nd, or the 3rd call, and you can just specify your logic based on that. And that event can trigger your webhook, and from there you just have to keep the state of the action, what are you making the decision about, and decide and also acknowledge it to the user. You should always say to the user, hey, I picked for you, because otherwise they might get lost.
Handling no match or avoiding the usual no match intent can be pretty tricky. And it seems kind of convoluted, but it is possible to avoid. So the trick that I always use for this is in Action Builder, I will create a type that I'll call the any type. And this type I explicitly set to have free form text matching. So what this means is anything at all will match this text. I then create an intent. And for the sample phrases of this intent, I will put in, a phrase, but I will make sure that it matches to a parameter, which I call the any parameter, that has this any type. So this way, basically any free-form text can trigger this intent. Then for the scenes that I want to make sure this gets handled incorrectly, I will make this one of my developer-based custom intents. So I'll use the any match intent for this and hand that off to a webhook. Then as part of the webhook, I need to keep count of how many times it's been invoked in a row. And again, fortunately, there are libraries like Multivocal, which can handle or help handle that for me by saving that counter in the session object. This way, I can now, if I want to end it after 4 attempts, I can make decisions to do it at that point. I'm not bound by this 1, 2, and 3 choke points, basically.
Of course, whenever we are chatting, we generally chat for hours and hours, but unfortunately we can't do that today. We are time bound by our segment, but I would love for you both to share how people could find you online. That way, if they want to learn more about you and what you're doing, they can follow you.
People can follow me at @Furstenberg on Twitter. I also have a podcast called Two Voice Devs, which you can find on various podcast platforms and on YouTube. And in Two Voice Devs, I work with my co-host, Mark Tucker, and we kind of explore these same kind of questions. How do we take things that we should be doing, and how do we actually do them?
You can find me on Twitter at @DennisVelasek, and you can also check out 𝗪𝗲𝗂 at 𝗪𝗲𝗂.app. Thanks for having us.
I love it. Thank you both for hanging out with me and sharing with me your tips and tricks on how you would implement these conversation designs. And I hope that you folks at home enjoyed this month's Ask the Expert segment. And back to Sophia.
Thank you, Jessica, Dennis, and Alan. And Alan, I meant to say Alan before. I don't know why Alex came out. Sometimes you just don't control these things. But it is so wonderful to learn how to execute these ideas and when to show which information is so important. And having a clear understanding of how to do that makes it a lot less overwhelming to manage each of these use cases. And now, let's hear the last two best practices from the day that came from our audience. So let's take a look. There were so many, by the way, that were submitted. It was really hard to choose, and they were all great. So definitely encourage everyone to check all the chat box to see all the best practices so that we can all continue to learn from each other. But the first one we wanted to share came from Technical RVI. Always analyze my voice app analytics and update the utterances or training phrases to make my voice app more inclusive. That's my best practice. I love that. I love that we've been talking so much about looking at the data and analytics. It is such a fantastic way to learn about how users are using our voice experiences. And this is a great way to be able to expand all the different phrases and the different ways that the devices can understand you. And the second one came from Voice Take Guy. Have different versions of the same prompts to not be boring. Another great one. This is something that I actually notice a ton. I notice when experiences do it and when voice experiences don't do it. Humans, we don't talk, we don't say the same things over and over again. So I think this is a great way to humanize a little bit the experiences. So thank you both so much for participating, and please make sure to connect with a moderator in the chat to coordinate receiving your device. We're at the end of another show, and I'd like to give a very special thank you to our guests, Noel, Sarah, Wally, Brandon, Heather, Jessica, Alan, and Dennis. Each of you generously shared your knowledge and your best practices in voice. So thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, thank you all for joining us and for watching and sharing your best practices. Please be sure to continue telling us the topics you're interested in and the guests that you like to hear from on voicetalks.ai. This is the only way that the show can continue to improve and make sure that we're producing content that you like. And thanks also to the awesome crew that produces this show remotely every month. We wouldn't be able to do this without you, so thank you so much. And we're going to be off next month, but before we meet again, there are two very exciting events in the industry, starting with Google I/O from May 18th through May 20th, followed by Voice Global on June 16th. Be sure to tune in for some very big announcements and surprises. And then we'll be back on June 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so make sure to mark your calendars. And remember, please vote for Webby Awards for Voice Talks and subscribe to our YouTube channel for all things voice. See you again on June 24th, and until then, ciao!